It's really just two people who play video games just kind of like getting excited about playing video games and talking about it. And then, the added bonus is that eventually they're going to be able to do that while getting paid.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm delighted to be speaking to Ted today, Ted O from Blizzard. How are you, Ted?
I'm doing great, Mike. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Pretty cold. It got to -6, -7 earlier this morning, but I'm told this weekend it's going to pick up. How about you? You're in California, right?
It's a chilly 64 degrees Fahrenheit. So
yeah, it's not quite London temperatures yet.
I buckled down and I wore a sweater today. That's about as, yeah. I miss the cold, though.
It's been cold here, and any background noise you hear is probably the multitude of heaters we've got on in the office trying to stop people from freezing.
Anything to keep the cold at bay.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So, Ted, thanks so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. And I'm wondering if you don't mind, if you could just start telling us a little bit about your journey, because you've had a bit of a varied route into where you've got to now, right? So, yeah, over to you. Let us know about it.
Sure. So I started off, and we had, for full disclosure, Mike and I have worked in the past, kind of like at previous studios. So we have I think we have a very positive work relationship. We shared a little bit about our lives. I started. I graduated from college with, of all things, a medieval history degree, right? So I was thinking, I'm just going to go to academia. That didn't work out at all. I realized that wasn't for me. And, soon after kind of like figuring it, I got this very small office manager job at this very small game studio near LAX. I was living in LA at the time. And that was really cool. I was mainly just baking bread for the office. They had a bread making machine. So that was like my main goal or my main task. But then one day the studio head gave me like a stack of resumes and said, why don't you talk to these people and, invite them into the office? And that was my first experience with recruiting. And and that's when I noticed, I really like this. I really like talking to people about video games. I really like talking to people about what they do for a living, and then letting them know kind of what the, what potential, what the jobs that we have at the studio, and how they would match. And so that's kind of when I figured out I want to do recruiting. And more specifically, I want to do recruiting for video games. And so it was a long time, I want to say, basically from 2013 to all the way up until 2020. It was about 7 years of learning how to recruit, trying to get into the gaming industry, almost getting in at times, and just never fully making it past the finish line. I had interviewed at Blizzard, of all places, no more that I scored an on-site interview at Blizzard every year for 7 years, but never made it, until 2020, where I got into Obsidian. Yeah.
I was looking at it, I did my research, Ted, and went on your LinkedIn, and obviously we started talking when you were over at Firaxis, but you've been around the block, eh? You've been Square Enix, you've been Riot, Amazon, Obsidian, now at Blizzard, previously Firaxis, so you've been to a fair few different places.
That's the thing. I was almost there. I was most of them were contract roles, so they were kind of, so my job was I got to impress them enough so that they could keep me on. And it was always an inch shy, or and so it was always just I was getting close, always getting the ball close to the goal, but always bouncing off of the rim. And so it was Obsidian where I kind of everything. I think I got the prerequisite amount of experience, and I think I got the prerequisite amount of maturity that really kind of kickstarted it. And that was, of course, right around when pandemic started. I think my first day was the day that LA officially kind of locked down for the first time. So
wow, what a start!
So I always wonder, it's was the price of me finally getting into the gaming industry was the trade-off just the coronavirus? So I feel a little guilty, but not too guilty.
What a journey. And you mentioned off camera, and you've alluded to it there, that you always wanted to work at Blizzard. And what was it about Blizzard that really lured you to wanting to be a part of it?
Yeah, so I was born in 1990. So like, and if you were into video games, like as a 90s kid, Blizzard was very hard. You would have had to work very hard to avoid, playing a Blizzard game. I picked up StarCraft when I was like 6. I didn't know how to play it at the time, but it looked really cool. And a lot of the older kids were really good at it. And then just kind of like, playing StarCraft, playing Diablo. Um, in 2016, like when I was, and there were brief stints where I was like unemployed and I was feeling really down. And my friend said, like, hey, play this. Blizzard came out with this new game called Overwatch. And I was like, oh, this looks a little different than most of the other like Blizzard games I played. And then like I played it at my friend's house, and 4 hours later, he had to drag me off of his computer. And I was like, no, I have to play more. This is so fun. And then when I got my, when I started like, finally like working as a recruiter again, and like I had the money to like get my gaming rig. The first game I bought was Overwatch, and so from 2017 up until now, I've just been playing it like at least like 2 or 3 hours every day.
What a great story. And if we really think about it, outside of this industry, there's not a lot of people that get the opportunity to do something or work in a business that they're so passionate about. What 0.1% go on to be professional sports stars, for example. And I guess this is our way, in its own way, of being able to follow our dreams, right? And I think that's something so unique about the industry. It's awesome.
Absolutely. And I mean, not to like add a little bit more, but like, a little bit about what I'm doing personally. So as I said, I've been playing Overwatch nonstop since day one all the way up to now. I am the associate recruiter for the Overwatch franchise.
That was going to
So
be my next question, and I know you're not allowed to speak too much about it, but maybe you could tell me, like, if you don't mind, Ted. You've obviously got to this point where you work for Blizzard, which is a place you always wanted to be, and you said early doors you wanted to go down that recruitment role. What is right now for you in that recruitment role at Blizzard, your dream company? What's the best part of your job?
I think the best part is just like I get to talk to people about like the two parties that go into like any sort of like candidate screen or interview is like there's the recruiter. In one sense, I'm the ambassador for the company, and then the candidate is somebody who wants to get in. And like I know that when I'm having this conversation, there's always going to be like the same amount of energy. Like I'm not having to bend over backwards trying to sell something to like a candidate. Like they know Blizzard. They know our brand strength. They know that they grew up playing our games more often than not. And so it's really just kind of like if somebody's excited coming into the room, they're bringing that energy, and all I have to do is just match that energy, and it's just always a really good conversation. It's always a great, insight as to kind of like how they think, what their thoughts on game design are, what they'd like to see, and it's just it's really just two people who play video games just kind of like getting excited about playing video games and talking about it. And then, the added bonus is that eventually they're going to be able to do that while getting paid.
What a job! Make it sound so
Right.
easy, Ted.
I mean, of course it's like, so much harder and so much more, demanding, but like, I think for someone who is passionate about it, like there's so much like you lose so much less energy if you're like, if you believe in the project, if you're passionate about the product, and
Absolutely. Now, by my reckoning, Ted, it's just about 10 years you've been in the industry now. So I'd love to know, what are the biggest changes you've seen since you first
mm,
entered the industry all those years ago? As I think you mentioned, you were making bread in an office, right? But there's things change so quickly in this world. Like for you, what are the most significant changes you've seen in that time period?
sure, sure. Well, first off, I want to say I'm flattered that you are counting all of my years getting into the industry as being a part of the industry. I would, being more pessimistic, I would say I've actually been in the industry, I think, almost about 4 years now out of those 10. The other six was me struggling to get in. That being said, a lot of things have changed. A lot of things have kind of, I would say, and so I wanted to kind of split that question into kind of like two answers. So, like, one answer is looking at the recruiting side, and this goes just for games, but like also in a general sense, I think recruiting has changed where like it's, I think the like marrying technologies like applicant tracking systems, kind of like increased use of social media, and maintaining kind of like our online lives as well as our in-person kind of like in-office lives. It's becoming more and more of like a it's becoming more and more of a singularity. So you'll have people on LinkedIn be like, a large part of what they do as their job is being on LinkedIn, being kind of what we might call like influencers, or kind of having a lot of clout. And a lot of that is there's a lot of good to that, because there's a lot of voices that are very well informed. And for prospective candidates, it's very helpful to follow those influential voices, because they're the ones with like their finger on the pulse of the industry. In gaming, specifically in games recruiting, there's been a lot of changes. I think from my experience, as a candidate trying to get in, like in the earlier years, I think I had this perception of like recruiting was kind of like the gatekeepers, right? Where it's like a lot of it was in the past, a lot of recruiters were like, it's kind of like, we don't need you. Tell us why you want, tell us why you deserve to be here. And I think, and there's a level of that still. I'm guilty of that as well. Like I fall into that trap all the time. But I think what's helping is that, like, I think there's a little bit of a change in philosophy where, you know, we want we want to open the gates up a little bit. We want to kind of be more welcoming, more democratic. Tell people kind of like how to get in, like let people know about like the secret little native knowledges or tribal knowledges or etiquettes, so that we don't want anybody to be tripped up by like a breach of protocol, if it's especially if it's just a harmless thing. And so being able to I think there's a lot more energy in educating candidates on how to like become better candidates.
Yeah. Um, and then if we look ahead to 2024, unfortunately, a recurring topic with a lot of these conversations is the layoffs that we experienced in the industry last year. I hope the worst is behind us. I sincerely hope for everyone's sake. But for you, Ted, looking ahead to 2024, have you got any predictions for the industry?
Oh, I'm not going to, I don't have quite enough money to put any wagers on that, but I want to say that it's going to be pretty painful. It's going to be painful for a lot of industries, for a lot of studios. It's already been painful for very many studios. And I think a lot of optimistically, I think that's just kind of like us finding a way out, just like everybody else is finding a way out of COVID, or out of how things were during the pandemic. I think this is kind of like our, the painful way of like us figuring out where our place is, kind of like in the larger, like a post kind of COVID world. So that optimistically, I think like we're getting there. I think we're slowly realizing kind of like what it takes to make a game, what it takes that, what players really want, and kind of like how do we do that in a way that's, timely and cost effective, and at the same time maximizing, the players' return on investment. Pessimistically, it's like this is a huge industry. It's large, as we love to say, it's larger than TV. It's larger than film. The money involved, like, is and the projects involved and the scale involved. That those adjustments are still going to be painful, and a lot of it is just kind of like and it's not. There's a weird democraticness to it where a lot of people, no matter how high you are, no matter how much of an industry veteran you are, it's like there's a level of everyone can be impacted by it.
Yeah, yeah, no,
So
absolutely, yeah.
yeah.
And people that thought that they would previously be untouchable or totally immune to the effect of the layoffs, and
Mhm.
it includes us as external agencies as well. Like it's
Yes.
everyone; everyone's impacted by it, right?
Hmm.
Um, I think I agree with a lot of what you say, Tay. I'm staying positive. From the outside looking in some respects, certainly there are some good signs. Um, I think VC funding is slowly starting to increase. I think more indie studios seem to be popping up. I
Hmm.
think there's going to be a larger spread of maybe smaller studios this year, and I would hope that the amount, because we're going to see layoffs this year. There's no doubt about it. I just hope it's not as severe as last year, and
Right.
um, I hope it won't be. I don't think it can be, but I think you're right in that we need to remain cautious.
Hmm. And I think like with all kind of like eras of upheaval and chaos, something really, the upside is like something really beautiful can form. As you mentioned before, a lot of people like moving on from like the bigger, more established studios, my own included, Blizzard included. A lot of people have like struck out, created their own indie studios. There's a lot of really cool game concepts that are out there, especially because they're leaner. They have the ability to kind of like experiment. I mean, I'm just thinking about, there's an RTS game that's coming out that's made from like a lot of ex Blizzard devs, and I'm a huge RTS fan. So I was like, I'm glad that someone is carrying on that torch and keeping those, keeping, I don't know, one might call like unfashionable game genres alive. And it's like, it's always great to kind of like, know that like things are always going to be there are always going to be profitable game designs. There's always going to be things that are like very popular, very kind of like flavor of the week. But like gamers in a real sense are like genres don't really go away. They just get recycled, and all of us, every so often inevitably there'll be somebody who has a really cool idea and they'll make their mark, and that's just more games for me to play.
It's certainly an interesting time, and it's one of the things I love about the industry. It's always changing, right?
Yes.
Um, Unfortunately, off the back of the layoffs, there are a lot of people out of work right now. A lot of job seekers on the
Mhm.
market. What advice could you give to those right now
Sure.
looking for a new role within the gaming industry, Ted?
Sure. So I want to say, I think the advice I can give both is applicable to people who are currently looking and also people who still have their jobs, but as we mentioned before, figuratively, the axe can fall on anyone, you know. And so I would say, first and foremost, keep your resume updated. Um, I would say also understand the roles that like a resume like is supposed to serve. And if you're the type of person that likes writing cover letters, or if you're applying to a studio that does require one, understand like what the cover letters like. Understand the two like both of those your two tools like purposes. Your resume is essentially, in gaming terms, it's your stat sheet. It's all about the like it's your attack, your defense, your special ability, all of the stuff that's just like hard numbers, and by and large, since that's data and the gaming industry is very much data driven, that's the thing that's going to be looked at. Your cover letter, should you decide to write one, that's going to be the one where they kind of show you like, I'm going to again use the Pokemon example, where it's like, you see it in the show, you see it in the game, where it's like, yeah, this Pokemon has really does his stats aren't as good as like the rest ones, but like there's something about him. There's like that, the heart that he has. That's kind of what the cover letters design. The purpose is to show like your heart, like tell your story, like give us a reason that we can make a like for us recruiters, give us a reason that we can kind of go to bat for you, or we can kind of take up your cause, I think that's the thing. I would say, understand, this is recruiters, we have to give a lot of grace to like kind of job seekers as well, because there's a lot of stress. Like Lord knows, you and I know, like looking for a job is way more stressful than like any job you could ever like have, right? And but I would say like while we are trying to like continually give you guys grace, a lot of it is understanding that like applying for a job is not, ironically, using the gaming language, it's not a simple matter of like input correct value, get correct output. There's a lot of X factors, there's a lot of personality, like understanding kind of like personalities, etiquette, that just kind of like understanding that like when you apply, you are sending your information to a person who's going to be reading this, you know and it's not so much you're trying to like cheat, like trying to game the ATS or the program. It's really look at it as like trying to convince a person who is already very positively inclined to talk to you, like give them another reason to like go to bat for you, and I think that's that might help, I think.
I think that's a really good way of putting it. To give them a reason to go into bat for you. I think that's excellent advice. I saw some really great advice on LinkedIn earlier. I can't remember who it was. I think it was, I can't remember his surname. Michael from Unbroken, he's produced there, put on some great advice. And he said, look at the job that you want. So if you're looking at so if I were to look at you, Ted, recruiter at Blizzard, his advice was use the same terminology and write your profile in the same way. I thought, actually, I've never even thought about it. I thought, what a great piece of advice that I've never seen shared before. I thought that was really, really, really good, really, really insightful. So I'll definitely be sharing that.
Yeah, terminology is dialect. Dialect is language. If you speak the same, when you go to, if I were to go to France and I were to speak to people in French, there's automatically like a rapport. There's automatically kind of like a resonance. It's the same way. Like, yeah, we're all speaking English, but like the terminology we use, the jargon, the kind of the cadence, it's very important for you to like for anyone who wants to so much of like a job is right already like acting like you fit, right? And so a lot of that is just language and understanding kind of like, and I would say this for a lot of people who want to get into the gaming industry but who are not entirely, I would say, like very clear on kind of what their goals are. And you and I, we probably receive a lot of this. I really want to work in games, but I don't know what to do. I really want to work in games. Can you look at my resume and see where I fit? I would say, and I always say this, it's like it's not necessarily the recruiter's job to find you a place. It's your job to figure out what you want to do, let us know, and then we can kind of go to bat for you that way, or we can tell you how to get there. For people who want to get into the gaming industry, the most important thing, other than understanding the human element and kind of applications, but like the most important thing is like have at least a goal in mind so that you can focus your energies. That doesn't mean like you have to chase that goal. It just at the very least it gets you direction to get there. And I think that's what kind of like the most important thing is like having that direction and having that focus allows us to help you a lot more.
Yeah, and for me, I had, pre-COVID when we were doing quite a bit of high volume stuff for a couple of clients in particular. We had a couple of those that were actually quite keen on people from outside the industry, and quite a common theme we saw there, which is something that I should share really, is that they were really, really interested in, say, programmers, for example, that were outside of the industry,
Mm-hmm.
but were doing side projects in gaming and that had a keen interest in gaming. So might be some really, really good C++ developers in, say, medical devices that were used, and some of them even used Unreal Engine, right, in some of these other industries, gaming projects on the side. So they were able to come into interview and say, I'm a really, really good programmer. I love gaming. These are some of my own side projects. And actually that was enough to springboard them straight into
Yeah.
the industry. Now, these particular candidates weren't at entry level because of the requirements of the client, but I thought that was a really, really good example, actually. And I think that that showed really, really quite nicely during that period that there are routes into the industry from outside to get in. So it's certainly not a closed door. And I think this is a message that we need to keep putting out there, Ted, for
Right.
sure, as you
Yeah.
are. Got a couple of questions left for you, Ted.
Sure.
The important ones now, right? So the first one I know, and again, you told me off camera, it might be something slightly different, but what are you playing right now? What are you loving at the moment?
Well, obviously Overwatch. It's one of those moments where, like, especially when I'm off the clock and I'm still in the office, like I'm playing with my coworkers, or, don't tell anyone, but sometimes on the clock, we'll do a play test, and it's like, oh wow, I'm playing video games at work, and I'm not getting yelled at. If anything, I'm being actively encouraged,
Yeah,
and
I think it
that's
counts as
what.
work.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
But especially when it's stressful, and especially when my teammates aren't pulling their weight. Yes, then it becomes then it becomes work. But that's so much. I have so much. That's still one of those things where like I never get like complacent. It's always something that like I am always reminded. I really, as mentioned before, I do like really strategy games. So I'm kind of, replaying a lot of the old Total War games that I have frequently, like the Warhammer ones, because I'm a big Warhammer fan. So I'm just like, I have a couple, Warhammer Total War games that I'm playing through. Baldur's Gate 3, obviously. I'm on my fourth playthrough now. Now that as a huge RPG fan, as a huge D&D nerd, just kind of the ability, the fact that like each of those four playthroughs is completely diametrically different from the other one. It's just like it's like mind blowing. And yeah, and I'm still playing a little bit of Starfield, working on my moon base and kind of getting all my mining operations all set up. So yeah, I have a lot of games kind of like that I'm slowly working on.
You're staying nice and busy, Ted.
That's why I work. I work so that I have the money to play video games.
Yeah, they've got you hooked, well and truly. And is there anything coming out this year that you're really looking forward to getting your hands on?
Oh man. It's so funny. Like they're in the back of my mind. I can't come up with like an idea like immediately. But like, and I know that like if you ask me today, if you ask me tomorrow, the answers would be different. Anything that's an RPG, anything that's kind of like a really story immersive game, I'm always on board. And not to spoil anything, but there are a lot of really cool things coming for Overwatch, and you know, we all of us on the team are like still devoted fans of it. We want nothing more than to see this game, be successful, continue to be successful. And, we know we still get so much feedback from people who like, this game, has people that look like me, has people that have my experience. And that's a very new thing in games, like in addition to kind of like the industry becoming more diverse, the stories we're telling are different. The stories they're telling are touching more people from different walks of life. And like we're still like we still get so many messages saying like, I can't believe that this hero like here is in this game because they come from my culture, they come from my like my background, and it's like and it's so fulfilling and it's so like gratifying. And that's why I think that's a unique kind of skill with Overwatch. Like we can tell those stories, and we can touch people that like the industry hadn't touched for before. And yeah, it's so fulfilling.
That's cool. Lots of exciting things to come out of Blizzard this year, I'm sure. Ted, that's all my questions. Thank you so much for coming on today. As always, it's a pleasure to speak with you, whether it's on camera or off camera. Really enjoy our conversation. So I'm really, really grateful for coming on. Thank you so much. I hope it doesn't end up getting as cold as it is over here. I hope it warms up here, and hopefully soon we can grab a coffee in person. That would be ideal this year.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Mike.
Thanks as always, Ted. Wish you the very best.
Likewise. Thank you.